The hijab is a must. That's what you've been told since childhood. Wear it because God says so. Wear it because your mother wore it. Wear it because good Muslim women wear it. But more and more women are asking, do I have to wear it? They feel trapped by years of tradition and cultural burden and expectations. They admit they never chose it. It was forced on them, either directly or indirectly. Many fear that if they stop wearing hijab, they'll abandon Islam. They won't be good Muslims anymore. After all, a good Muslim woman wears hijab out of love for Allah. Right? We'll see what the Quran says about this. But first, let's see what a lot of women are feeling today. Imagine being 12 years old. Your mother sits you down and tells you that you need to start wearing hijab. Not because you asked. Not because you understand why. But because your older sister wears it. That's the reason. You're 12 and there's no discussion. From that moment on, hijab becomes part of your identity, not by choice, but by obligation. But nowhere in the Quran does it tell parents to force their children into religious practices before they're old enough to even understand. In fact, the Quran emphasizes choice, understanding, and maturity in faith. Your choice matters. Your understanding matters. Being forced into something at 12 and now as an adult, they tell you it's your choice? That's not Islam. That's cultural pressure dressed up as Islam, but you love how it makes you feel connected to your faith, to your community, to the women you admire, to something bigger. But at the same time, you feel trapped. It makes you look like the odd one out. People treat you differently, but not in a good way. At times you don't feel like part of society. You want to wear hijab and take it off without your entire identity collapsing. So you're stuck in this impossible place, loving something and resenting it at the same time. The Quran talks about doing things because you genuinely believe in them, not because you're forced or pressured. If your hijab is coming from obligation and fear, not genuine belief and choice, that's the problem. The Quran doesn't want to force you. It wants willing hearts. So if you love hijab when it's really your choice, that's different from wearing it because you've been made to. So what do? You leave home with your hijab on. But on the way to work, you take it off for a few hours. You get to be yourself. You get to breathe. You feel relieved. But then as you get close to home, the anxiety kicks in. You put it back on. You walk through the door and you're back to being the hijabi daughter, wife, mom. And this makes you feel guilty. It makes you feel like a hypocrite. But here's the thing, you also feel relieved when it's off. What does that relief mean about your faith? Are you abandoning Islam? The Quran says your relationship with God is between you and God, not between you and your family. Not between you and society. Your intentions, your choices, your faith, those are between you and God. You shouldn't have to sneak around in the first place. The pressure you're under, the fear, that's on them, not on you. Your relief when you take it off doesn't mean you're abandoning Islam. Because Islam has nothing to do with this. But your family makes it clear, if you take off your hijab, you're abandoning Islam. You're a bad Muslim. You're bringing shame on the family. They threaten disownment. You're dead to me. Emotional blackmail. The reality is they really don't care about your hijab, but rather their own status in the family and social circle. After all, they cannot have a daughter like this. What will people say? Let's see what the Quran says. It tells you to honor your parents. But it also tells you that no one, not even your parents, can force you into sin or make decisions for your faith. So your parents don't get to use Islam as a weapon to control you. And most importantly, removing hijab is not abandoning Islam, since it never was a part of Islam to begin with. You're tired. Tired of being defined by your hijab. tired of people only seeing the hijabi girl instead of seeing you. Your personality, your intelligence, your dreams. You become a symbol before you're a person. And if you ever take it off, suddenly you're not just making a personal choice. You're rebelling. You're un-Islamic. You're confused. You're lost. But you're not any of those things. You just want to be seen as a human being, not a walking representation of someone else's version of Islam. The Quran never ties your worth as a Muslim woman to a piece of cloth. The Quran talks about great women like Maryam, the mother and sister of Prophet Musa, the Queen of Sheba, and none of their greatness is tied to how they look or dress. Their greatness is tied to their character, not to their clothes. So when the Quran never says any of these things, then how did this narrative that a Muslim woman's defining character is a piece of cloth above all else get imposed on Muslim society today? Something that is causing so much mental anguish in a lot of women today. Where did this come from? The answer isn't found in the Quran, it's found in history. During the time of the Quran's revelation, head coverings and loose clothing were already part of local customs. It was a necessity in the hot desert climate. And it wasn't just women, men wore similar clothing too, and still do today. So when the Quran uses words like kamar, which literally means any cloth or covering, not specifically a head cover and jilbab, it's using the language people already understood. It's not imposing a universal dress code for all time. But after the Prophet's passing, this would be deliberately injected into Islam. As Islam spread through the Levant and northern Africa in the 10th century, scholars started to impose the term hijab with modesty and covering. They issued un-Quranic rulings which imposed these conditions on local clothing traditions. What was once a cultural practice became codified as Islamic law. What was once flexible was made rigid. By the 16th century, there was still no standard Islamic hijab. It varied region to region. Ottoman Turkey had the yashmak, Persia had chadars, Arab regions had their own customs. But scholars were constantly trying to standardize it. And now let's come to the most important part in the history of hijab. In 1967, Arab states suffered a humiliating defeat. Looking for answers, it was immediately blamed on abandoning Islam. And then an entire generation was guilt-tripped into Islamization to cover their humiliation. The hijab became the most visible symbol of this political movement. Young women were told, wear hijab, be moral, be Islamic. It caught on fast because it was practical, it worked with modern clothing and was easy to wear. And this is what is still being practiced today and told it's part of Islam from the Prophet's time. So here's what the Quran actually says. Chapter 24, verse 30 to 31. The Quran orders both men and women to cover their private parts and dress modestly, not to attract undue attention to yourselves. That's it. No mention of hijab. No mention of hiding your hair. No mention of covering your arms till the wrists. No mention of wearing black abayas. Nothing. Just cover your private parts, dress modestly, don't draw attention. That's the Quranic mandate. Everything else is nothing but culture, tradition, political invention. Your choice. The Quran never tied your faith to a piece of cloth. Only your heart matters, and that is what makes you truly Muslim.